You'd think your own daughter's wedding gift would be the safest thing in the world. Something wrapped with love, with care, maybe with nostalgia. Not whatever this turned out to be, for Emma handed me the jar at her rehearsal dinner. It was small, amber glass, sealed with a cork and a soft blue ribbon she tied herself, the same color as the flowers in her bouquet. "Tea," she said, smiling. "It's herbal. A blend I made at the wellness retreat last spring. I thought you could use something grounding." I didn't question it. Why would I? My daughter just got married. I'd hosted 30 people I barely knew. The chicken was dry. The best man cried. Half the floral budget melted in the sun. And through it all, I smiled like the mother of the bride was supposed to. So when my only child gave me a jar of tea, I said thank you. I hugged her. I put it in my handbag and thought, sweet kid. Maybe a little too into lavender lately, but still sweet. That night, after everyone left and the last of the champagne glasses clinked in the sink, I sat alone at my kitchen table and untied the ribbon. There was a note beneath the lid. It just said, 2 teaspoons in hot water, every night. Sleep well, Mom. No heart, no love, Emma. Just instructions. I laughed. Typical efficiency. Honestly, I didn't drink it at first. I was tired, wired, and wine-slicked by midnight. But the next evening, after the final decorations were boxed and sent off, and the house had that unsettling silence it always gets after a big life event, I made a cup. The smell was interesting. Minty, floral, something sharp underneath that I couldn't quite place. First sip. Not bad. A little bitter, like she'd been heavy on the valerian root or whatever they were teaching at those overpriced retreats. But fine. I drank it every night that week, and I slept. Not just slept, floated, dreamless, weightless. For the first time in months, maybe even years, I didn't wake up with my jaw clenched or my mind reworking tax tables from 2003. It felt like peace. I told Emma. She texted back, "Told you, you overanalyze everything, just enjoy, okay?" I almost replied with an eye roll emoji. Almost. But I didn't want to be snarky, not after everything. After the year she had, the breakup, the engagement, the silent months between us when I wasn't sure if she even wanted me at the wedding. This was good. Progress. On day 6, I woke up disoriented. Not dizzy, exactly, just uneven. Like someone had shifted the floorboards 1 inch left. I chalked it up to old age. 64 isn't ancient, but it's not nothing either. I mean, I've had my share of wine migraine mornings and the occasional brain fog. It happens. Except it didn't stop. By the second week, I started writing things down. Symptoms, times, dosages. Yes, I know how that sounds, but when something doesn't sit right, I revert to spreadsheets. Always have. I didn't tell Emma. Didn't want to worry her and frankly didn't want to sound paranoid. But here's the thing about being logical. Even logic gets nervous when the data builds up. Day 12, I woke up with a nosebleed that hadn't happened since perimenopause. Day 14, my heart was racing. Not panic, just fast. Too fast. Day 15, I forgot the name of my neighbor. The same woman I'd lived next to for 22 years. Let's be real, that's not tea. I tossed the next cup in the sink. It smelled different by then, or maybe I was different. I spent that night lying in the dark, eyes wide, heartbeat loud in my ears. Was this aging? Was it a coincidence, or was it something else? I got up, flicked on the kitchen light, took the jar down from the shelf. It looked innocent, still sealed tight, still tied with that soft blue ribbon. I untied it again, slower this time, and asked myself a question I never thought I'd ask. What exactly had my daughter given me? If you're still listening, have you ever had someone give you love that didn't feel quite right? Let me tell you what I found. It started here, but it didn't end politely. I almost poured it out. I had the cup in my hand, lukewarm already, the steam gone back into the air, and I just stared at it. The smell was gentler tonight. Less sharp, more like something you'd find in the aisle next to soft music and overpriced candles. I kept thinking, maybe it's just stress. Or maybe I'm reading too much into small things because, well, that's what I've always done. To be honest, Emma used to tease me mercilessly for it. Not everything needs a spreadsheet, Mom. She'd roll her eyes back when she lived here. She'd say it with love, but also with a wall, so I drank it, just a few sips. I waited for my pulse to spike, for the dizziness, the weird fuzz at the edge of my vision, but nothing came, just stillness. Heavier than usual, sure, but manageable. I reminded myself that I'd just hosted a wedding. I'd been up later than usual, talking to people I didn't really know, answering endless variations of how's retirement treating you. And is Emma your only? Fatigue has a way of slipping into the cracks of routine and settling like mold. That night I slept. I mean, really slept, blackout sleep, the kind you wake up from and wonder if time skipped. But sometime around 4, near the edge of morning, I sat straight up in bed. No nightmare. No sound, just a jolt. Like my body had decided on its own that it didn't want to be still anymore. I couldn't fall back asleep. I sat in the dark, clutching the edge of the blanket, scanning the walls like the air might whisper something useful. I got up, made tea again, not the blend Emma gave me. Mint. Store-bought, predictable, weak. I watched it swirl in the mug, the color spreading like memory. And I thought, what if memory was the problem? I had forgotten my old neighbor's name yesterday. Not just for a second, but for a full minute. ID looked right into her face, smiled, and said, "Hi there." I hadn't done that since chemo, and I'd never had chemo. That morning, I pulled out the jar again, sat it on the counter, took a photo, then another, zoomed in on the label. There wasn't much, a hand-drawn flower, Emma's cursive, peaceful mind blend. No ingredients, no date, no source. I scrolled my phone and found the link Emma once sent me to the retreat she'd gone to. I skimmed their blog. There was a post about herbs that soften the mental rigidity of aging. It mentioned things like skullcap, kava, lemon balm. It also mentioned something I'd never heard of, hyoscyamin. I clicked, alkaloid, anticholinergic, used in low doses for intestinal cramping, but too much can cause confusion, disorientation, blurred vision. I blinked, stared at the photo again. My hands stopped moving. I'm not a doctor, but I know this. Confusion is not an herbal side effect. It's a warning. Still, part of me said, maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe this is what slowing down feels like, and I'm just fighting it. But another part, the part of me that built an entire business from nothing, tracked every decimal to the cent, never missed an audit, that part whispered louder than the rest. Something's off. I called my doctor's office and asked for blood work. I framed it under routine post-wedding fatigue, which, honestly, I bet no one had ever said before. They booked me for Friday. Tuesday night, I skipped the tea, just to compare, just to be objective. And you know what? I didn't sleep at all, but I remembered everything, what I ate, what I watched, what I felt. No clumsiness, no nosebleed, no forgetting my own damn microwave code. The next morning, I sat in the kitchen with both jars, Emma's tea and my store-bought mint, and stared at them like pieces in a puzzle I knew had no picture on the box. I didn't want to believe it. Emma's always been headstrong, sure, private, even manipulative when it suits her. But this? No, she wouldn't, would she? I finished my coffee and opened the cabinet again. Behind the flour tin, I found one more thing, a small bag, unmarked, tucked inside a folded linen napkin. Same style, same ribbon. There wasn't supposed to be a second one. I didn't remember putting it there. I didn't remember a lot of things now that I thought about it. And that, right there, was the thing that scared me most. What do you call a gift that takes something from you? Because I was beginning to think this one had stolen more than just sleep. I stared at my notebook like it was a tax return that wouldn't balance. I'd filled 2 full pages front and back. Each line, date, time, symptoms, what I ate, what I drank, how long I slept. Every variable logged and color-coded. Just like I used to do during audits, except the only thing under review now was my mind. And I hated how little I trusted it. I always thought if I ever started losing myself, I'd see it coming. I mean, that's the deal, right? You forget where you put the keys or you misplace a birthday card, you chalk it up to age. But when it happens repeatedly, you notice. You compare. You start compensating. I was compensating, and I still couldn't make the numbers add up. Because the strange part wasn't just the frequency. It was the neatness. Every symptom, every foggy morning, every jolting wake-up at 4 a.m., every moment I blanked on something basic, landed within a window of 24 to 30 hours after drinking that tea. Not always the same, just close. But close enough that a regular pattern should have formed, except it didn't. There were skips, jumps, blank days, like someone had gone into my spreadsheet and removed rows. That's when the real fear hit. Not because I thought Emma had done something awful, but because I was starting to realize I might have done something awful to myself. Maybe I wanted to believe the tea was the problem because the alternative meant accepting something deeper, something irreversible. Still, I kept logging. I skipped consecutive nights just to see. The first time I didn't sleep at all. The second time I slept fine but had. A nosebleed in the shower the next morning. Unrelated, possibly, but I circled it in red anyway. By Thursday, I'd scheduled blood work. The receptionist asked if there was a specific concern. I almost said, "My daughter may or may not be poisoning me," but I went with just checking some inconsistencies I've been tracking. She didn't ask more. God bless format-driven medicine. At the clinic, I kept it vague, the way women like me were trained to. 64, no family history of Alzheimer's, vitals stable. Sometimes tired, sometimes foggy. Sometimes unsettled for no clear reason. The nurse nodded like she'd heard it before. Maybe she had. Then the doctor asked, "Are you taking any supplements, herbal remedies?" It landed like a dropped spoon. I paused, smiled, too wide, then said, "Well, my daughter gave me a homemade tea blend after her wedding, just herbs." His eyebrows lifted. "You know what's in it?" "Not exactly, but she's not an amateur." Why I said that, I don't know. Habit, I guess, reputation protection. He scribbled something down anyway, probably mother minimizing, right next to possible interaction unknown. I left the clinic with a dull headache and a brochure about sleep hygiene. It was insulting. I'd built an entire career on details. Clients used to say I remembered every number they ever muttered across a decade. And now, I was being handed a pamphlet like a teenager who kept a phone under her pillow. I went home and made tea. Not Emma's. Chamomile this time, boring, pharmacy grade, no danger of subtle sabotage. Then I sat at the kitchen table and opened the jar again. I poured the rest of it onto a white plate and spread the contents out with a spoon. Leaves, stems, petals, nothing dangerous screamed back at me. But there was a faint dusting, powdery, almost gray lavender, not natural, not from any plant I knew. I collected a sample in a plastic sandwich bag, labeled it "Blend a Suspect," and sealed it like evidence. It felt ridiculous. It also felt necessary. Because here's the thing, love doesn't come with warning labels. But maybe it should when the person you love believes they're fixing you. Emma had always said I overthought, that I was too intense, too structured, too much. She wasn't wrong. I've been called a lot of things in my life: efficient, controlling, sharp, but never warm, never soft. She once told me, "You confuse control with safety." And I said, maybe because I've survived more than you'll ever understand. She didn't like that. She walked out of my house that night and didn't call for 3 months. And maybe this was her way of nudging me, soften me, help me. But if that's what this was, I was starting to feel less like a mother being cared for, and more like a project being managed. The next morning, I woke up at 4:12 a.m. chest tight, vision blurry, and a single thought lodged in my brain like a splinter. What if this isn't even about me? What if it's about taking something from me, my vigilance, my clarity, so I'd stop seeing something Emma didn't want seen? That's when I decided to stop thinking like a mother and start thinking like Linda Carter, CPA, retired, widowed, fully alert, and being watched. Let's just get something straight. I'm 64, not senile. But apparently, if you're a woman over 50 and you bring up confusion or fatigue, everyone's first guess is menopause, even a decade after the fact. When my blood work came back normal, I wasn't surprised. I was irritated. Estrogen levels stable, the doctor said. No signs of deficiency, thyroid's fine, vitamin D, B12 completely within range. His tone was calm, like reassurance should have fixed the way my head felt detached from my body. "So everything's perfect," I said, flat. He hesitated. "Well, not perfect, just not showing what you're describing." "Exactly." He leaned forward, clasped his hands. Standard, concerned professional body language. "Sometimes what you're feeling isn't always captured in a blood panel. It could be stress-related or a reaction to something environmental." I didn't move. "What kind of environmental factor? New meds, changes in diet, supplements, any herbal remedies?" There it was again, that word, herbal. I nodded, slow. "My daughter gave me a tea blend, said it was for calming the nerves, nothing unusual." He lifted an eyebrow. "Did she make it herself?" "She said she mixed it at a retreat in the mountains, supposed to be all natural." He scribbled something I couldn't read, then looked back at me. "Some retreats use herbs that aren't FDA regulated. Skullcap, kava, even small doses of belladonna derivatives." I blinked. "Belladonna, that's not just an herb." "No, it's not. And in the wrong amount, it can cause dry mouth, blurred vision, hallucinations." "I've had episodes," I blurted. "Not full hallucinations, but disorientation, waking up detached, one nosebleed, and once I couldn't remember my neighbor's name." He stopped writing. "How long have you been drinking?" "This tea, about 2 weeks, almost every night. I skipped maybe 3 days total." "Do you still have some of it?" "Yes." "Okay," he said gently. "Can I suggest you bring it in? We can do a simple analysis. It won't prove intent, but it'll tell us if there's something in it that shouldn't be ingested regularly." The phrase hit me like a nail through glass. Prove intent. That's when I realized he wasn't thinking about hormone shifts anymore. He was assessing whether I'd been drugged. I nodded too fast. "Yes, I'll bring it." I went home and set the jar on the counter like it might lunge at me. This wasn't yoga teacher nonsense anymore. This was chemical. I took a spoonful, carefully slid it into a Ziploc, labeled it Sample A, and tucked it into the cooler I used for Emma's birthday cakes when she was little. As I closed the lid, I caught my reflection in the oven door. I looked tired, but not just physically. I looked like someone who'd started to question the language of love in her own house. Because Emma hadn't given me poison, not directly, she gave me calm. She clothed it in lavender, in endings and well wishes. She said, "You need this," and smiled like it was a truce, not a muzzle. When she was 13, Emma used to say I was all spreadsheets and no soft. She wasn't wrong. But I got her through private school, through undergrad, through her panic attack after her first failed engagement. I paid off her credit cards twice. And I stayed out of her business when she decided to marry a man after knowing him only 6 months. I gave her space. And now, I was the one being gently subdued. I paused, pulled out my old tax calculator, the one with the faded keys. Not because I needed to calculate anything. Just because I needed a sound that made sense. The beep, the precision, the comfort of a total that resolved. But this tea, this soft fix, slow rinse sabotage, the math didn't balance. And the worst part, it almost did. If I hadn't tracked symptoms, if I hadn't skipped cups, if I hadn't remembered to be suspicious of anything handed to me with too much sweetness, I might have chalked it all up to age, to decline, to something inevitable instead of intentional. The next morning, I drove the cooled sample to the lab. The technician didn't blink, didn't flinch. Apparently, my daughter gave me this isn't as rare a sentence as it should be. "We'll run it against known compounds," she said. "Should take 3 to 5 business days. If we find anything unusual, you'll get a call." I nodded, then asked, softer than I meant to, "Has anyone else brought in tea?" She didn't answer. Just pressed a sticker onto the bag and slid it into a drawer I wasn't allowed to see. I got back into my car, swallowed dry air, and stared at the dashboard clock. 5:42 p.m. Emma would be getting home. She'd probably light a candle, unpin her hair, pour herself a glass of wine, and what? Text me, ask how I'm feeling? No, she hadn't texted in 3 days. The last thing she sent was a meme, something about cats and anxiety. Soft, pointless, forgettable. I pulled out my phone, typed, "Hey, sweetie, what blend did you use in the tea?" Deleted it. Typed again, "You ever feel like you're not fully awake these days?" Deleted that too. I sat in silence. Because once you start doubting someone's gift, you start doubting everything they've ever handed you, even their words, even their face, even the name they call you when they knock on the door and say, "Hi, Mom, I brought something for you." And next time, I won't open it. The lab called on a Tuesday at 10:17 a.m., I remember, because I was folding laundry when the phone rang and dropped a towel mid-fold. I never do that. The woman on the line sounded clinical, like she'd just finished explaining something serious to someone else and needed a breath. "Ms. Carter, we've completed the analysis on your submitted sample." I waited. "There was an unlisted compound present," she said. "Trace amounts, but pharmacologically active." I pulled a chair out with my left hand, sat. "What kind of compound?" She hesitated for a fraction of a breath. "It's called acetylhyoscyamine, not typically found in standard herbal blends. It's an anticholinergic alkaloid man-made synthetically, derived from plants like nightshade or datura." "Spell it." She did. I wrote it twice. I didn't even try to say it aloud. "And what does it do?" "In very low doses, it can act as a sedative, reduces nerve signaling. Sometimes prescribed off-label for gastrointestinal issues. But side effects can include disorientation, memory disruption, blurred vision, dry mouth, agitation." "So it dulls the brain." She paused. "It lowers central nervous system activity. Think of it like turning the volume down." I nodded into the silence. "Could it be accidental," I asked, "that this ended up in a tea blend?" She inhaled slowly. "It's possible, but unlikely. It's not something you'd find growing wild in your backyard. And even among herb alists, it's only used in tightly controlled formulations." "So someone added it, deliberately, measured." I thanked her, hung up, and stared at the notepad. Acetylhyoscyamine. A word that looked like it belonged in a chemistry textbook, not in a wedding gift. I sat at the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and typed the word into 3 different search engines. I scanned medical abstracts, obscure wellness blogs, 2 Reddit threads so cluttered I almost gave up, until one phrase caught me. "Known to produce mild compliance states. Used controversially in early psychiatric treatments before regulation." Compliance states. Let me tell you something about accountants like me. We don't get goosebumps easily. We don't jump at shadows. We track, we categorize, we reduce chaos into columns. But that phrase, that broke something I didn't even know I'd built, a mild compliance state. Is that why I'd said yes to things that week I wouldn't normally? Why I'd let Emma cancel our Sunday lunch with one flippant, "next time," and not push back? Why I'd paused outside her house and then driven away instead of knocking? If someone had asked me that week, "Are you doing okay?" I wouldn't have said no. I would have said, "I'm fine." Because I was floating. I was slowed, softened, managed. I pushed the laptop away. I could feel my fingers trembling, but not from fear, from betrayal. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a mise-measured blend or a misunderstood herb. Emma had given me something she knew I wouldn't research because it was disguised as care, wrapped in ribbon, named Peaceful Mind. And the worst part, it worked. For a while, it worked. I went quiet. I didn't question. I slept when I wasn't supposed to, forgot details I always remembered, started doubting my own rhythms. I went compliant, not because of age, because of formula. I opened the fridge, pulled out the last bag with the pale blue ribbon still intact, used a fresh spoon to scoop a pinch into a white bowl. I looked at it for a long time. Then I opened the kitchen drawer, the one with the things I never use. Antique tea strainers, tiny cookie cutters from decades past, and at the back a folded slip of paper I hadn't touched in years. Emma had written it when she was 16. A list of things I love about Mom. I unfolded it. There were 12 entries. Number 7, she never lets people walk on her, not even Dad. Number 11, she sees everything, even when you think she doesn't. I read that line 3 times, and then once more for the part of me that had forgotten it. Because this time, I almost missed it. I put the paper down. I went to the sink, poured the tea into the trash, not the drain. I didn't want it dissolving into my pipes, hiding again. Then I stared out the window, birds, cars, a world that had kept moving just a little too easily while I wilted behind a curtain. And I thought she didn't want to hurt me, but she didn't want me sharp either. She wanted me soft, quiet, easier. and that's not what mothers are for. The next time she calls, I won't answer with, "Hi, sweetie." I'll ask her to spell what she thinks love means, and I'll see if she stumbles. She handed it to me with 2 hands. That's what I keep coming back to. Both palms open, the little glass jar resting in the center like an offering. She looked at me, smiled, not wide, not bright, just soft, and said, "You overthink everything, Mom, this'll help." She kissed my cheek after that, walked back toward the bridesmaids, veil in one hand, bouquet in the other, and left me there holding something that seemed harmless. I hadn't noticed then that it wasn't wrapped with a tag. Just the ribbon, just the name, just that tone in her voice, the one that tried to sound gentle but had something else packed inside it. Compassion, maybe, or impatience dressed as care. It's strange how a moment can feel both warm and weighted once it rewinds in your memory. I hadn't looked at her face too closely that day. Maybe because I wanted it to remain beautiful. Maybe because I was exhausted. Or maybe because I didn't want to see the version of her I wasn't invited to know. The version that planned this. Still, I told myself, there's a world of difference between intention and impact. People hurt each other by accident every day, especially the ones we love. But the dosage was measured, the compound unlisted, the bag hidden. That wasn't accident. That was design. I waited until Saturday to call her. I didn't want a scene. I didn't want it over brunch or while she was with her new husband, probably planning a couple's spa day or something equally calming. I sat in my sunroom, sunlight pouring over the table like a confession. I made myself a fresh cup of green tea, store-bought, tasted like cardboard and safety. Then I dialed. "Hi, Mom." Her voice was bright, too bright. "I was actually just thinking about you." "Were you?" "Yeah, I saw a pair of earrings at the market and thought, Linda would hate those." She laughed. "I didn't. You don't call me Linda." "Okay, cranky pants," she said. "Did you have your tea today?" There it was. That flick. That tiny hook disguised as kindness. "I haven't had it all week," I said, steady. "Didn't feel like it." A pause, quiet enough I could hear her exhale. "Everything okay?" she asked, tone dipping from sunny into concerned like a rehearsed transition. "Actually, no, Emma, I had it tested." Another pause, quieter. "The tea?" "Yes," I said, "all 3 jars." Still no sound on her end. "They found a compound, acetylhyoscyamine." I pronounced it slowly, deliberately. She didn't ask what it was. Instead, she tried a different move. "Mom, you've seemed so on edge lately." "I just wanted to help you take the edge off." I felt it then, that shift, the moment when someone stops denying and starts justifying. "You thought drugging me would help." "Drugging is a bit extreme, don't you think?" "No." I sipped my tea. It tasted bitter now. "I think hiding an unregulated neurosedative in your mother's drink is textbook drugging." She sighed. "God, okay, that's not how I meant it. They use that stuff in spas for relaxation. It's natural." "No," I said again. "It's chemical. It was hidden." And it didn't make me relaxed. It made me forget my own neighbor's name. She said nothing. I could feel her brain working, trying to map the right response. "I just wanted you to rest," she whispered at last. "You've been tense. After the divorce and everything with the business, you don't sleep. She trailed off. "Too much." "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to. You used your wedding gift to say it for you." I expected her to cry. Emma always cried when she landed somewhere she couldn't argue her way out of, but she didn't. "I thought," she said, "if you could just quiet down inside a little, you might feel better, lighter." "And if I didn't want quiet?" I asked. "What if I needed the noise to stay sharp, to know I was still steering this ship?" She didn't answer, not right away. Then, "I didn't mean to hurt you." "I know," I said. "You meant to change me." That landed. I could hear it settle in her chest, heavy and unwelcome. "Are you going to tell anyone?" she asked, an odd question, not "are you okay?" or "do you hate me?" "But will you escalate this?" I breathed in. "No," I said, "not yet." "Why not?" "Because I wanted you to know I saw it, that I saw you." And in the silence that followed, I imagined her sitting very still. Imagined the blue ribbon on her kitchen counter, maybe tied in her own hair now, like nothing ever happened. "Don't send any more gifts," I said, soft. "And next time you think about fixing someone, ask what they'd like to keep first." She said okay. But I didn't believe her. Because once someone decides you'd be better, different, it's hard to trust them with who you already are. That night I slept without tea, without fear, not dreamless, but full of things I remembered. I remember the first time Emma lied to me. Really lied, not the kind a kid tells to avoid bedtime or hide a dented bicycle. A lie with shape and weight, a lie spoken without flinch. She was 15. She said she hadn't skipped school, but her eyes didn't blink when I asked. Her voice didn't shake. She'd rehearsed it. That was the first time I understood. My daughter had learned the architecture of believable. She knew where to place pauses, how to soften her tone, how to offer enough truth to shade the parts she bent. That's what I thought about after our phone call. Not the compound, not the tea, her voice. Too level, too calm, like she wasn't caught, just inconvenienced. I sat with that for longer than I care to admit, because once you've confronted someone and they don't blink, you realize how long they've been prepared for the moment. I started pulling old trinkets from drawers. Cards, trinkets, emails she'd written in college, messages after the divorce. You doing okay, Mom? Texts after Dad's death. Let me know if you need me. They read like support. But in every one of them I noticed a pattern, no follow-ups, no real questions, no room for a messy reply. Just enough presence to say she'd been there. Emma had always done the bare minimum required to maintain relationship optics. She didn't want closeness. She wanted clearance. She wanted my approval, my money, my silence, but not my scrutiny. And for years I gave her that, because I thought I was being supportive, because I thought she needed space, because I thought love meant don't press too hard. But now, with the tea gone, the fog lifted, and the math done, I saw it. The entire relationship had been managed, not nurtured. And the scariest part, I was complicit. I'd accepted her curated warmth, celebrated her gestures, laughed off the deflections, because it was easier than facing the woman behind it. After the call, I didn't cry. I reread the lab results, checked the timestamp on every message she'd sent over the past 6 months. There were fewer and 2 dozen. 6 one-word replies, 4 memes, 8 logistical updates, 2 birthday reminders, nothing that asked how I really was, but there was one photo, a selfie of her and her fiancé, now husband, holding a cup of tea in front of a window that wasn't mine. The caption said, "To calm hearts and quiet worries." I zoomed into the tea jar in the background. Same ribbon, same label. It wasn't just for me. He drank it. She did too. What did that mean? Was the tea a ritual, a symbol, a product of their shared vision of peace? Or was I the only one who didn't get to choose what went into my cup? I don't know. And what I don't know matters less now than what I do. She didn't panic when I confronted her, because she never believed I would. Because she thought, somewhere deep down, that I'd rather keep the illusion than disrupt the script. And for a long time, she was right. Mothers tell themselves stories. Good mothers, even more so. But I don't want to be a good mother anymore. I want to be a whole woman. And whole women don't drink from cups they didn't pour themselves, even if the ribbon's blue. Even if the hands that offered it once clung to their knees in childhood. I made a list that night. Not a spreadsheet, not a ledger. Just a single page with 2 columns. What I know and what I pretended not to know. Under column 1, the tea was altered. She didn't deny it. She minimized what it did to me. Under column 2, she never apologized. She's been managing me for years. She'll likely do it again. I underlined that last one twice, because that's the point I had to reach, not just that it happened, but that I finally believed it could happen again. And if I still let her in, if I let her try again with a new blend, a new tone, a new excuse, then the damage isn't on her anymore. It's on me. The next morning, I changed the locks, not because she had a key, but because I needed a symbolic shift. The old handle stuck sometimes. The new one clicks, clean, certain, like me finally again. Sure, I remember her. That's the first thing the woman behind the counter said when I showed her the jar. I mean, how could I not? She asked a lot of questions. Her name tag said Renee, and her face was the kind you trust too fast, wide eyes, sensitive cheeks, warmth that hadn't yet learned when to shut off. I hadn't expected to hear certainty. I definitely hadn't expected familiarity. "You're Linda, right?" she asked, blinking. I froze a little. "Excuse me." She said she was getting this for her mom, really wanted something that would help with, what did she call it? Cognitive rigidity. I remember because I thought the phrase was kind of clinical. I didn't smile. I didn't blink. I just said, "How much did she buy?" Renee gave a soft laugh. "More than we usually sell to one person. Had to special order one of the extracts. Most people don't want to mess with sedative nervines, not without medical consultation." Sedative nervines. God, what a beautiful phrase to hide a weapon inside. She mentioned the name of the compound. Renee nodded. Not directly, but she had notes, pages, ingredients scrawled with ratios. I assumed she was an herbalist, or at least training to be. Was she? Honestly, no idea. She carried herself like someone used to being right. That part made me pause. Yeah, that sounded like Emma. "I'm curious," I said, keeping my voice level. "Was she worried at all about interactions, symptoms?" She said she'd monitor, that it was a controlled setting, only for someone she knew extremely well, someone she said trusted her completely. I looked down at the jar in my hand. The label was starting to curl. The ribbon had faded at the edges. Did she seem concerned? Renee hesitated, then folded her arms tight. No, if anything, she seemed proud. Proud. I let that word settle into my spine. "Can I ask," she said, softer now, "did something go wrong?" 100 answers flickered through me. Yes, no, not yet, too late. "I'm fine," I said. "Now," she nodded like she'd heard that line before too. Then added, "You know, I see all kinds of intentions come through this counter. Some folks want to heal, some want to help, and some they want to make someone else quieter, easier." I met her eyes. Renee didn't flinch. And that's when I understood. Emma hadn't just crossed a line. She de-prepared her path. She'd written her dosage. She de-sourced her tools. And she'd told a stranger, one who now stood calmly across from me, that I was a project. A project to soften, to calm, to fix. That night I sat with that knowledge like it had weight, because it did. It sat in my chest and asked me, what else has she pre-planned? I replayed every moment from the last 6 months. The tea, the texts, the silence. And underneath it all, the absence of true curiosity. She hadn't asked how I was. She de-asked if I'd taken it, like a prescription, like protocol. I opened an old USB drive buried in my drawer, one I hadn't used since tax. Season 3 years ago. Inside, folders labeled Emma College, wedding budget, Emma 2022 protocols. I clicked through, shaking now not with fear but with history. Emma had always preempted me. She knew how I operated, checklists, patterns, order, so she adopted them, mimicked them, used them. Her wedding seating chart had been a master class in persuasion. She'd seated family members she didn't like far from center stage, but made it seem like a logistical accident. Her budget presentation for honeymoon funding had included actual ROI language. Emotional return on investment, she'd grinned. I'd thought it was clever. Now it sounded like a shell corporation masking intent, all carefully stitched, all palatable, until it was. I closed the drive. I didn't want to turn her into a villain. I don't think I ever will. But I'd be damned if I let myself remain the product. Someone else's reform project. Someone else's experiment in behavioral adjustment. I made a cup of tea that night, chamomile, real, weak as it was, and I wrote one sentence in my notebook. She didn't panic because she'd already practiced being caught. I stared at the words, then underlined practiced. Because that was the part that burned, not that it happened, but that she expected I'd let it slide. The next day I bought a safe, not to hide valuables, to keep my mind intact. I've always said, I don't collect favors. I just don't return them right away. Which is why, when I called Marlene Jacobs after 15 years of nothing more than 2 Christmas cards and a condolence bouquet, she said one thing. Is this about your daughter? She didn't ask how I was, didn't do the thing people do when they're stalling for context. She just went straight into the marrow. I sat on my back porch, phone warm against my cheek, the spring air too gentle for the kind of conversation we were about to have. Marlene, I said, do you still know people who can look things up? Her laugh came easy. Linda, I never stopped. Marlene had been a compliance officer in the state's Pharmaceutical Oversight Division for 28 years. She was the reason 2 doctors lost their licenses for overprescribing benzos in 2004, and the reason my divorce lawyer tiptoed around her at every PTA meeting. We weren't close then, but we respected each other. 2 women who spoke fluent logic in a room full of men who preferred pleasantries. "Marlene," I said, "I think Emma's been buying things she shouldn't have." "Define shouldn't morally, legally, or functionally." I smiled. It cracked something tight in my chest. "Legally and quietly." Over the next 10 minutes, I gave her what I had, the compound name, the purchase window, what the pharmacist said, no guesses, just patterns, just data. She didn't interrupt. She took notes. And then she asked, "Do you want to file something?" "No," I said. "I want to know if I'm crazy." She paused, then said, "You're not, but I'll prove it anyway." 3 days later, she sent a PDF. No commentary. No subject line. Just a file titled, "Carter Emma Non-Clinical Purchase Summary." PDF inside were 5 order receipts. 3 from online holistic marketplaces. 2 from compound labs with disclaimers in fine print. Not for internal use unless under licensed supervision. Emma had bought hyoscyamin extract in pre-mixed dilutions. Not raw ingredients, not plants from a garden. She bought pharmaceutical-grade modifiers. And she timed each order within 10 days of my birthday, the wedding planning kickoff, and the week right after she met someone who could help you reset, according to her own text last year. I closed the PDF, didn't shake, didn't scream, just breathed, then called Marlene. "She bought it knowingly," I said. "Yes. She used my name when she ordered the second one," I added. "I saw that." I waited for her to tell me what to do. Instead, she asked, "What do you want her to learn?" That stopped me, because I'd been holding the question backward, wondering what I wanted Emma to feel. But Marlene asked what I wanted her to learn, and that's when I knew. "I want her to understand," I said slowly, "that not every mother is someone you can manage. Some of us remember how to ask for help. We just don't always use the lever." "Well," Marlene said, "you just pulled it." That evening, I didn't call Emma. I didn't forward the file. I didn't send a warning or a threat. Instead, I printed 2 copies of the report. One went into my lockbox. The other folded and sealed into an envelope with her name. No note. I dropped it at her front door myself. Didn't knock, just drove away. There's a power in silence, not the kind she tried to feed me, not the drugged hush of a compliant state. Real silence. The kind that holds its shape because you chose it, not because someone else imposed it. I sat at the same kitchen table where she'd once yelled at me at 19, "You never let me grow." And I'd answered, "Growing is not the same as disappearing into yo." Her own rules. Back then, she didn't understand what I meant. Maybe now she would. I made tea, mint, weak, honest, and I thought she might call, she might not. But now she knows that I know, and that I remember how to play the long game. I didn't need revenge. I needed reflection with paper trails. She gave me poison in the language of care. I answered with proof in the language she understands, documentation. Started with "Dear Emma," and that was the only part that felt honest. For 20 minutes, I sat in front of the page, pen touching paper, waiting for the words to climb up from somewhere deep, steady, righteous. But they didn't. I tried again. "I know what you did." Too sharp. "What hurts isn't the tea, it's that you thought I wouldn't notice." Too much accusation. "I love you, but what?" Love doesn't survive a disclaimer. Not when it's been diluted. Not when it's been dosed to keep you quiet. I crumpled the paper. Started over. This time, I leaned into what I thought she might understand. "You've always been excellent at preempting things. You saw loops before they closed. You learned how to soften hard conversations in advance, how to layer control with care until the difference blurred." That part I kept. Because it wasn't just about what she did to me. It was about what I allowed, what I mistook for closeness, what I tolerated as style. For years, I chalked up her avoidance to personality. I told myself not all daughters were affectionate. That space was a form of respect, but the tea made it clearer. She didn't want distance. She wanted direction, hers for me, and I almost followed. On line 17, I wrote, "You didn't try to poison me, you tried to design me, and that's what I can't come back from." My hand shook after that line, as if something finally exited without permission. I folded the paper, slid it into an envelope, wrote her name in ink, but I didn't seal it. I put it on the kitchen counter right by the sugar bowl she once gifted me. The one she said was retro, cute, perfect for your morning coffee. I remember thinking, even then, I don't use sugar, she never asked. It was decoration, like so many things she gave. I stared at the envelope for 2 days. Every time I passed it, it felt heavier, as if the ink itself carried weight. On the third morning, I slid it into a drawer. Not trash, not fire, just away. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing, not out of fear, out of measured choosing. A neighbor stopped by that afternoon. Deborah, widow, meticulous, soft-spoken. She said she had extra lemon bars. I let her in. We talked about nothing, then a little of something. And she said, "You seem clearer lately. Lighter, it's nice to see." I almost laughed, but I said thank you, because I knew what she meant. I didn't feel lighter exactly, but I no longer felt like someone drifting inside someone else's idea of what I should be. I made tea that evening, just hot water and mint and thyme. No herbs from jars with ribbons, no notes under lids, no questions about whether I was dosing myself or being gently dissolved. Just tea, honest, weak, enough. I keep the letter, not as a threat, not as evidence, as proof to myself that I could have responded and chose not to, because I am not a version to be softened. I'm not a voice to be turned down, and I am not my daughter's idea of peace. You don't always know when the collapse begins. It can start with something simple, a ribbon, a sweet smell, a gesture that looks like love but feels a little too quiet. They don't need to raise their voice to change you. Sometimes they just lower yours. And if you're like me, you might not notice it right away. Especially when it comes from someone you raised, someone who called you mom while handing you something you no longer recognize. But here's what I've learned. Being loved doesn't mean being managed. Being strong doesn't mean being alone. And peace, real peace, doesn't come in a jar. It comes when you set the cup down, when you reach out, when you hear your own voice again, clear, unfiltered, fully yours.